We are talking today about the evocation of our vocation, and I want to start with speaking to the difference between an invocation and an evocation. At many spiritual centers, they use the term invocation to start the service. In other words, they're invoking the Spirit, and notice what my hands are doing. They're invoking the Spirit of the universe. At Agape, we use the term evocation. Why? Because we're evoking the Spirit that is who and what we are. It's a powerful and fundamentally different way of being in the world. We are shifting now, and I've been saying this for the last 6 months, and then I come to find out this is how consciousness works. I was talking with Reverend Michael, and I was telling him this thing that's kind of been coming to me. He's like, oh yeah, I've been saying that for a while. And I love that. And that is, we are shifting from the law of attraction to the law of radiance. And so what we're going to be really talking about today is how we shift into a way of being where we know that we know that we know who and what we are. And as we live in the world as that, it's not that we attract, it's that we radiate. And when we radiate that deepest truth of who and what we are, here's the amazing part. It does seem like the universe starts to line up to that vibration, that frequency. But I don't know about you, but for me, I spent at least a decade in the law of attraction. Maybe, if I'm really honest. Well, let me get really honest. So, for sure, from the age 20 to age 30, I wasn't living in the law of attraction. I was living in victim consciousness. The world was happening to me, and it wasn't fair, and I didn't know I was doing it. I had no idea. I wasn't yet aware completely. I was aware because I came into spiritual practice. I walked into my first community in 1988. And if I do math correctly, I think that means I was 23. So I was young in terms of being in New Thought. Because if we look around New Thought, a lot of us maybe have a little more gray than some other spiritual communities. And what is that about? Maturity. Carl Jung says we spend the first 40 years developing an ego, and this is going to be a paraphrase, but the rest of our life dismantling it. Right, so there is something that happens for many of us around that age, which is actually right on target with what I want to share about, because in my 20s, even though I was around New Thought, even though I had taken my first trip to India, with the absolute knowing I was going to have the most profound and powerful spiritual experience that ever happened on the planet. And what really happened for me is I walked into Almachi's ashram in southern India, and I was immediately hit with a wall of pure love energy, and I repelled it. Only because what I know today, what I didn't really know then, was I wasn't in a place where I could receive that yet. Maybe it was because I didn't believe I deserved it. Maybe it's because that frequency didn't match the frequency that I was living in. But again, I was living in the world happening to me, and I believed I was broken and damaged, so I was walking around the world and I kept experiencing broken and damaged. So right around the time I turned 30, it seems to happen for me right on these decade marks, I came back to New Thought, because I had spent a lot of time becoming really fabulous again. Right before that. And I came into New Thought and I heard Reverend Maureen Bass at Unity San Francisco saying something that was really powerful. The law is only working, always working. And how do you know it's always working? Look at your life. Look at the circumstances of your life and see if that matches the narrative and the energy you're feeling. In other words, if I'm walking around feeling broken and damaged and the world is out to get me, am I experiencing that? And so what she said is, you're a powerful creator. And I got it. Oh my gosh. I became aware of the voices, the narrative. That narrative of, why is this happening to me? What's wrong with me? When am I ever going to get better? When is this ever going to get different? Why does this keep happening over and over and over again? And I knew enough to know I was the common denominator in the issues in my life. I had enough awareness to know that. But I didn't yet understand what was needed in order to shift that narrative. So when I walked back into New Thought, there was a strong focus in this level of consciousness that we would call the law of attraction. In my book, Conscious Being, I write about 4 levels of consciousness, and then, of course, one more time, I find out that Michael Beckwith had been writing about something almost identical years earlier. Right? So we tap in, the information, the feel is always there. So I tuned into this frequency, and I recognized these different levels of consciousness that came through me. I wrote it in my book, and then someone actually came up to me after my very first talk and said, "Have you ever listened to Michael Beckwith? You said the exact same thing he has said in his book." And I'm like, "Oh, that's so cool," but I didn't read it yet. And then look at us now, right? Connected. So that stage 3, I call magical thinking level. Stage 2, magical thinking, and that is my thoughts create my reality. And so I recognize that as a powerful truth, but here was the issue for me. I tried to change the thinking, but I couldn't really change the thinking because the core belief or the core idea about myself was matching the narrative. Do you hear that? So we come into this world as whole and perfect spiritual beings. And then life happens, and I feel damaged and I feel broken. I take on this identity of my own brokenness or my not enoughness. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with the world. And when I concretize that in my unconscious, no amount of changing my thinking is going to have any permanent shift. Life is energy. And we know that thoughts are energy. But there's this other energy. There's this beingness. There's this vibration, the core vibration. And what we know is the essential core vibration in each of us is infinite. So if we are these infinite beings that are capable of manifesting, which we're going to talk about in a moment, anything, what prevents that from actually happening? The stories, the ideas, the beliefs, looking back at what the traumatic experiences of our lives were. But not so much what happened, but what I decided about what happened. What I decided about myself. So I tried to change my thinking using affirmations, and it was powerful. It was really fun. How much fun have we had in the manifestor stage? That's what Michael calls it, Reverend Michael. The manifestor stage. I call it magical thinking because I was part of a community early on that would say, we would say something. If I would have a limiting thought, I would say, "Oh, cancel, cancel, cancel." Right? Because I thought as soon as I said it, the universe was going to respond. "Oh no, I just said something about illness, I'm going to get cancer." I mean, and it was true. That's what people were really believing at that time. And it was kind of, well, that part might not be fun, but it was kind of fun recognizing that I could change my thinking and change my reality or change the circumstances of my life. Vision boards. I did a lot of vision boards. And a lot of it actually came to pass. It happened. It was so much fun. And I was with a community that was like, "Isn't this cool? We're so powerful. We're manifestors." And it did work. But here's the thing. There's a couple things I want to touch on. And again, this is my experience. I love often when people will ask Diana Katie a question, she will often start with, "I don't know what's true for you. I do know what's true for me." Right? Because we all have our own journey. In one way, we're all on the same one journey, and then we have this unique path that leads us where we're going. So I don't know if this is true for you, but for me, what was happening was I did do the vision board. I did manifest what I thought was going to bring me happiness. Do you hear that? And that's the key. I had backwards. I thought if I could just manifest the life of my dreams, I would feel whole and perfect. I would feel happy. I would feel connected and content. So I got most of what was on that vision board, and I said, "Is this all there is? I don't feel different." And so I recognized there wasn't inherently anything good or bad or right or wrong about manifesting. It was neutral. The stuff in the world was far more neutral than I imagined. So that was one issue. I got it, and it didn't change anything, not really. So I didn't realize at the time, and again, this was most of my 30s, I was in that magical thinking, manifesting stage. I didn't realize at the time that that wasn't going to bring me joy. What we recognize is that joy will actually bring more of that. And so, through a series of events that were extremely painful, I want to be really clear. It's okay if pain is a part of your journey. Because again, that old stage, that community, we couldn't talk about anything that was painful because we didn't want to manifest it, right? So I wouldn't talk about anything happening to me that wasn't good. As a matter of fact, the narrative in that community was, we call it good. Whatever happened, we call it good. And again, I understand that. It's powerful. Because if we're walking around with things are bad, learning how to shift it to things are good is a powerful part of the process. It's a part of our evolution. Oh, I've been calling it bad and I've been experiencing it as such. But there was this moment in my life, Leslie was there, where I had the calling to go into a deeper vocation. And that's really what I want to talk about here. I had built my life as a doer, not a beer. I don't know if that's a word, but it don't matter. Conscious being leads to conscious doing. But what I was doing was, I feel broken. I need to manifest all this stuff so I can feel okay, and I'm going to be in the doing. The vision boards, the goals, the workshops, the affirmations, the rubber band on the wrist, flick. Oh, I said something negative. Right? So all of that, and what I want to say about that is it was all part of the process. And then there was this place where I realized that the truth only comes from within. And it comes from within each and every one of us in a unique way. So if we know that it's true that essentially we're all whole and perfect and we're all infinite beings, that means there's infinite information within each and every one of us. Most of us are so busy, we don't even know it's there. I was so busy trying to be fabulous and trying to manifest and trying to get everything on the vision board so you would know how spiritual I am, that I was missing what was always there. And as I got quiet and listened to that inner voice, I started hearing and feeling very clearly that my life was going to take an incredibly different direction. And that I wanted to do spiritual teaching, which is kind of a joke. Now I realize, because we're not here to really teach. I thought that's what it was. And doing some work in the addiction field. So it was coming up, and to tell you the truth, for the first year I said no. I didn't even want to acknowledge it. I didn't tell anyone that was what was coming up because I couldn't understand how I would make that a vocation. I had all this judgment, right? Judgment about what it meant to become a minister and how I couldn't live, and oh my God, this is the Bay Area and I don't make any money. And I had this whole narrative about how I couldn't do it. I was in a workshop once and I was asked to be in a partner with someone, and this was a very good friend of mine. And we were looking at what is ours to do, our soul's purpose, our life, the blueprint for our own life. And through a meditation process, we got in touch with listening to that inner voice. And when we came out of the meditation, I looked at my friend, and we're in this process, and her eyes lit up. It looked like 20 years fell off her face. And she said, I'm here to help animals. It's always been that. And then she paused. But at my age, I watched it happen. Her face lit up, she felt it, she expressed it, and her mind immediately came in and said why it couldn't happen. And I recognized that because that's exactly what I did. I did it for a year. And finally, I dedicated myself to really listening. And it's one thing to get the message. It's another thing to have the courage to speak it and start to act in the midst of that vision. Why is this important? Because when I create from the manifestor realm, it's quite possibly, maybe not always, certainly true in my journey, it came from my mind. And my mind is a powerful creator. It also has a whole story and a point of view about the world. Point of view. Moving into what we call stage 4 consciousness or mystical consciousness is arriving at a place where we come to trust very clearly the inner voice. Most spiritual teachers of the past, Buddha, Jesus, many spiritual teachers have talked about this voice. It was called the still small voice in some traditions. Because in the beginning, that's how it shows up quite often for many of us. Because this voice is so loud. And this voice, the collective, not you personally, but the humanity has a collective narrative. And most of us, in some way, have bought into it. What it means to be female, what it means to be male, what it means to be my race, what it means to be my age, what it means to be from the Bay Area versus Texas. I hear that one all the time. And then I go there and I'm like, I don't necessarily experience that. Right? Because love is who and what we are. I had someone that I thought was pretty evolved. She said, I'll never go to Texas. Why would I ever do that? So there's millions of people that are out of the picture because of a judgment about a place she's never been. Right? And I say, whoa, that's me. I do that. I have all these ideas about things. What I want to talk about for the rest of our time together here in the next 10 minutes or so is how we shift from doing to conscious being, and how conscious being naturally gives rise to conscious doing. And I want to read one of my very favorite quotes. This is one that, it's actually been a while since I've revisited this, and it's something that came across my consciousness in meditation. And to me, this is a Taoist reading. And to me, this speaks so clearly of what we're talking about as we shift into mystical consciousness. So what is mystical consciousness before I read this? It's profoundly simple. God, love, light, source, whatever word we use to try to define the indefinable, because in Taoism they say, once you name it as the Tao, it's no longer the Tao. Right? But that place, Native Americans call it Great Spirit, right? Because it's unknowable. I think in the Jewish culture, it's the unknown of a mystery.
Yeah, God.
Right. Don't even speak the name, right? Because it's unknowable. And yet, it's who and what we are. Do you hear what's really happening there? We're not here to define it from our mind or even our emotional heart. We're here to allow ourselves to know that's who and what we already are. And when I listen very carefully to that voice, it takes me in all kinds of interesting places in ways that my mind could not have imagined. And how do I know that I'm on purpose? My life is a lot more magnified than I could have imagined on my own. So I want to read this. Again, this is a Taoist reading, and this reading changed my life because around the time that I was really listening to the voice, someone gave me this. The great way is not difficult for those who are unattached to their preferences. Let go of longing and aversion, and everything will be perfectly clear. When you cling to a hairbreadth of distinction, heaven and earth are set apart. If you want to realize the truth, don't be for or against. The struggle between good and evil is the primary disease of our mind. Not grasping the deeper meaning, you just trouble your mind's serenity. As vast as infinite space, it is perfect and lacks nothing. But because you select and reject, you cannot perceive its true nature. Be at peace with the oneness of things, and all errors will disappear by themselves. So I'm happy to send that to anyone or post it on our Facebook page, because every sentence in that reading is life-changing when we practice it. Clinging to a hair-breadth distinction in heaven and earth are set apart. In other words, when I have a preference, as it says in the first sentence, and I'm going to talk more about that, when I have a preference, I create what we might call hell. Separation, competition, us, them, good, bad, right, wrong. When I rest in a deeper reality, I recognize that it's infinite. So people will often say to me, are you really saying we're supposed to live beyond preferences? And my answer is really simple. Do you want to be at peace? Do you want to be at peace? It's a choice. It's a choice we make. Now, does that mean that we call it all good? No, it's very different than that. It's recognizing that in the midst of anything happening, I can see my mind calling something evil and calling something good. And when I do that, I suffer. And the thing that's amazing about it is when I do that, I also create more of it in the world. Again, life is energy. Matter, as Dr. Sue Morter says, matter is compressed energy. Right? So when I say, this is it, boom, I experience it. So what if, rather than calling something good or bad, I simply live in a question around it? Or I live in a recognition that in the midst of it is wholeness and perfection. Because again, the last sentence is recognize the oneness of all things and be at peace. And when I'm at peace, that peace radiates. When Amelisa is at peace, that radiates. See, that's the law of really being as someone. I think it's Anna Matte says, lighthouses don't go look for a boat to save, they just stand there shining. Right, so can I just stand here being in the law of radiance, knowing a greater reality? That is indeed how consciousness changes on the planet. What happens when we fight? What happens when I struggle? What happens when I have a point of view? And so people then will say, okay, let's break this down in real life. Are you saying that you can spend a day without preferences? So I'll tell you, one, yes, I think it is absolutely possible to live in that field of consciousness at all times. Now my mind forgets that. My mind forgets that's who and what I am and who and what you are. Sometimes my mind comes in and like, whoa, I have a lot of opinions here. Opinions. I took a spiritual challenge many years ago with my friend John to go 30 days without an opinion. I can tell you right now, I went about 30 minutes. And I realized that I was expressing opinions all the time without even being aware of it. Oh, I don't like that place. Oh, their food isn't very good. Right? So then I thought, okay, I'm going to not voice my opinions. But what I discovered was they got louder in my mind. Because I wasn't expressing them, so they were getting bigger. Oh, and then I had an opinion about that. Because I had a judgment about my judgments. And then I was totally going down this spiral of, oh my gosh, is this ever going to shift? And then I realized something really powerful. I don't need to change my thinking. I can simply recognize it's not who and what I am. I simply recognize it's the program that has been given to me, and really more accurately, the one I took on. Right? Because even saying that someone gave me a belief system is giving them the power. And now that I at least look in the mirror and see an adult, sometimes shockingly so, I recognize that now I have a choice. But again, I'm either choosing unconsciously or consciously. And so we can spend years, this is why we go to therapy for years. Nothing against therapy, I love therapy, it actually saved my life more than once. But a lot of times therapy is only talking about the narrative, the pattern, where did it develop, where did you come up with this? But then what do we do with it? Right? So I know where it all came from. It came from a belief that I had about myself when I was a kid, a belief about my dad, a belief about my mom. and a belief about white people, and a belief, all of it. So I recognize now that I can actually land in a place where I can allow that to be and recognize it's not the truth. It's true only in relative reality. And the call to action here is one of recognizing who and what we are, living in that, and then saying, oh, isn't that interesting? Look at my mind doing that. What I want to close with is sharing that when I went to India in 1992, I wanted to have that intense and powerful spiritual experience, and boy, did I want it. And I did have it in a very different way, because I repelled, if you remember. Couldn't take it in. So I went back to India in 2005. And this was during the time that I was listening more to the inner voice. And what was happening in my life was everything was falling apart. And I don't mean it was falling apart. All kinds of stuff. My business was collapsing. Everything, let's put it this way, everything that I had on the vision board that came to be was leaving. What's happening? But I had been around long enough to recognize that it's what we call in New Thought chemicalization. Right? When I come to a higher level of awareness, a deeper level of awareness, all that is not like it needs to get burned off so that I can be in this consciousness. That doesn't mean it wasn't painful. It was excruciating because a big part of me still wanted to cling to it. Right? So I went to India again, went to Varanasi. Varanasi is a city, they say it's the oldest inhabited city in the world. It's 10,000 years. Don't know if that's true, but it felt that way for sure. I was told, also it's a place where many Hindus believe if you die there, if you transition there, that you remove karma. So people travel from all over the country and all over the world to go to Varanasi to die. That's not the whole story, but that's a piece of Varanasi's story. I was told that if you're pretty open spiritually, you're going to feel a particular energy there, that it's really very palpable. And we were going on our rickshaw bicycles toward the city. And I started feeling this experience, this tingling going up my arm. And then my heart just flew open. And we ended up out on the river during the Arti Festival. And if you know what that is, it's the Festival of Light, seven platforms, which is beautiful. That's another thing you can YouTube that might be even better than the other one I recommended. Wow. What happened is my ego, for a period of time, seemed to disappear. I sobbed pretty uncontrollably for about an hour, which was that kind of burning off. And then I landed in this place where I literally could feel and sense oneness. I knew there was no separation. I could feel and I could see the particles of what we call reality, and I recognized, wow, we can shift those particles. That's reality. I landed in reality because the illusion had been stripped away. And it lasted that way for several hours, even into the next morning. And what happened also at that time is all the power in the city went out, which at least at that time in India wasn't uncommon. So it was total darkness, except for the Arti Festival and the bodies burning on either side. So we floated toward the burning bodies, and as I got closer, there was a recognition of life. There was no death. It was just life happening. Infinite potential, infinite possibilities. I touched reality. Now, I would love to tell you that my ego never came back. And I would also love to tell you that nothing painful ever happened after that. But I actually, things fell apart even more after that. Even more. I had a legal situation, I lost a business, my best friend betrayed me. I got to see, wow, is that true? Did he betray me? No. My mind believed he did. But what I didn't know is that experience that happened in India created a permanent shift, not in my ego, but how it related to my ego. And again, Dr. Sue Morter, you're both here, so I'm feeling her. Only ego would want ego to die. I love that she says that. That's what I wanted. I wanted to be egoless. And perhaps that's what happens when we die. I don't know. But what happened, and I didn't know it at the time, was I had a permanent shift in the way I viewed and experienced my ego. It didn't leave. I just recognized it's not the truth. This beingness, this essential nature, this infinite possibility, God essence that we are, that's the truth. That's the reality. And when I live in that and recognize the ego for what it is, I land in a place where I start creating or evoking in a completely different way. And then it seems like the universe responds. That's really popular in our culture now. Dear universe, show me a sign, or the universe, right? We switched it from God to universe, but it's pretty much the same concept, right? Universe, show me. What we're talking about is something that's true, by the way. I'm not saying that's not true. What I'm saying is there's also a deeper way to approach life, and that is no matter what's happening in the universe, I know who and what I am. And my knowing that creates a different reality, and I'm open to seeing things that I didn't know were there. And my mind said, look, I manifested that. But it was always there. I just literally couldn't see it. There are infinite possibilities in your life right now. There are infinite possibilities in what you call your work life, if you work. Some of us don't. That can be joy as well. The vocation, who you have come here to be, that blueprint is within you. Not as a predestined, you need to be this, but I'm going to listen to the inner voice, the inner knowing, and I'm going to be guided by that, and then I'm going to have courage to take just one step toward that. But really one step past that. And then life starts to change. Life starts to shift. People show up in our lives that match the frequency. Suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, this was so easy. So it can take a lifetime and it can happen in an instant. That moment that we know. So my invitation for you, as you go out into your day, which is always the way I like to close a talk, is my invitation for you. As you go out into your day, is be that and know that. And just notice the narrative. And can you notice the narrative without judgment? Oh my gosh, look at all my opinions. Aren't those interesting? And maybe we don't have to analyze them. Where did I get that? Because what we do is we end up analyzing, and then we find our posse that agrees with us. Right? Isn't it true? And then what happens? That gets more and more solid. So there are my opinions. Krishnamurti says the highest form of human intelligence is to see ourselves without judgment. What am I doing? What am I creating? What am I here? Who have I come here to be? What might happen if I experiment for the next 10 minutes of knowing who I am? What about for the next 10 minutes I have no judgment about my ego? There it is. It's a gift. It's all a gift. So are you ready to be love? Are you ready to be light? So repeat after me. I am love.
I am love.
I am light.
I am light.
I have said yes to my calling.
I have said yes to my calling.
I am here to be the love I've been looking for.
I am here to be the love I am looking for.
I am here to be the light I've been looking for.
I am here to be the light I am looking for.
I say yes.
I say yes.
And what a joy it is.